till I find a tin for them. My Ziploc bag was not reliable enough.
Yep.
Won't stop. Sorry. Should I get a FaceTime requested? Should be. Hey, it is now 4:30 and we welcome you to our study meeting. It is 4:30. Got here. It's 4:30. We are in the multipurpose room of West Valley City Hall. And we have Councilman Northfelt here, Councilman Whetstone, Councilman Harmon, Councilman Hoon, and myself. And we will let you know if anybody else joins later. Otherwise, Councilman Fitzmanu and Councilman Christensen are excused. I've lost my agenda, so is there anything else we need to do, Nicole?
Nope, just the code enforcement.
Okay, so we're going to study the ordinance enforcement items, and I'm going to turn the time over to Councilman Harmon for the rest of the meeting.
Okay,
Well, for that section.
thank you, Mayor. It's been, I think, three, almost 4 months since we really started talking about this, so I may repeat some of this just to refresh all of our memories, but courtesy notices. I think I mentioned they were not as courteous as I think they should be. The deadlines in chapter 10, it says of code enforcement, it says that notice shall be at least 10 days from the date of service. And then it also states that regular mail, add 3 days to that. So, and at the time, during this last summer, we had some that were getting them and not even having 10 days to respond. So that's an issue I would like to discuss. And then also multiple notices within just days apart. And then no callbacks for code enforcement was one of the issues. And then also code enforcement officers not being courteous when a citizen talked about landscaping and they got hung up on. So those were kind of the past issues that we talked about 4 months ago. So we've heard in the past from Lane and Wayne both have said that we get equal complaints. Enforcement is too hard or too soft. And I think that the problem with that is if we use that as a barometer, then make changes, right? So hopefully we can move forward together to improve code enforcement. Otherwise, I've been thinking about this for 4 months. I really do think if we can't improve it, then we disband the whole thing and be done with it. So, but my intent and my intent 4 months ago and currently still is to improve transparency and clarity for both staff and citizens. So that's where I'd like to start. So any other thoughts that council has on previous discussions or topics you want to talk about? Otherwise, I'll continue on. But anything, Lars?
Well, I think we should dive in deeper. I mean,
Yeah.
your first thing was the courtesy notice, I think, is that right? Let's look at it and see what suggestions we can make to make it better.
So, is that you? For me, I received I don't know how to call it, complaint or just a notification to me that an individual received a notice that the snow wasn't removed within 24 hours. So it was from like a Thursday, it was mailed or written up Wednesday or Thursday. They got it on Monday and it was going to be inspected on Wednesday, 2 days later after they got it. So if that had been, got to get rid of weeds or anything else in 2 days, there's no way, 2 work days as well to get that done. So I think the mailing of the notices, and then they said it wasn't very clear. That I've understood because, you know, that gentleman I met out in the lobby this year, he did not understand what his notice was at all. So after looking at these pictures, I could point out some stuff, but his person was on vacation, nobody else would talk to him, and his time was running out. So for me,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, for me, I would just, after thinking about both of those situations, I think it needs to be, like, we can't do it from when they receive it. So I think if you mail it on Wednesday, that weekend doesn't count because it's going through the mail. If it really takes that long, I am going to mail a letter to that person and see how long it takes to get there, to see if we're mailing them on Wednesday and they're getting them on Monday, or if they're mailing them on Thursday or Friday, but postmarking them on Wednesday. And see what the mail system is really doing. And then the other thing, I think they need 2 weekends to be able to resolve the problem. So it's almost like 3 weeks from courtesy note written to them being inspected. But if it falls in a manner that it's not going to fall for 2 weeks, it needs to fall for 2 weeks before. Because, you know, everybody has jobs. Can't just take a week off and address whatever. And no, you should never let it get bad enough that you would have to take a week off, but just knowing that everybody's busy, I think that would be one thing to improve on from what I've heard.
Just go back to the snow removal. So did they not get the 10 days
No,
in chapter 10 to get that corrected? I mean, that's in chapter 10. I think that's.
no, it was,
Right?
yeah. It was 1 week from when it was written, not when they received it, but when it was written to when they were going to inspect it. And on that one, the gentleman has cameras and he can prove that there was never snow on his sidewalk 24 hours after the end of a storm. It was always cleared before that. So, but I did not tell him to come to public comment and show us all the pictures. I said, okay, we're going to talk about it. So we'll see if we can resolve some of these issues. So he didn't understand.
I'm trying to understand. The law says that they need to clear the snow off the sidewalk by 24 hours after a snowstorm.
After the end of a snowstorm. Yep.
So are you saying that if we give them only 10 days, that's not enough time, or?
Well, the snow one is totally different than the normal summer ones, but it
Yeah.
needs to be consistent. You know what I mean?
Well,
So-
I know what you're saying, but it's a big difference between I have weeds on my yard,
Right.
and I have snow on my sidewalk.
Right.
I mean, one of them is a safety hazard and there's a reason we need it cleared off in 24 hours,
Right.
right? So I don't think we should give them 10 days to clear the snow.
But who makes the judgment every time of which one gets a short notice, which one gets a long notice?
Well, I think if
And-
it's snow, it's got to be done in 24 hours.
Well, his video shows it's done in 24 hours, but he got a courtesy notice anyway. So he was really calling for the other
Well,
thing,
that's
but the
different
notice time is a
Than
different
than
thing.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. But even the notice thing, by the time the snow probably occurred, was probably a day or two before the courtesy notice or the day of.
Yeah,
But by the time it even got mailed in that, it was way past the time it should have been removed.
seems weird that we would mail a courtesy notice for snow. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but
Did he
Yeah.
mention if it was an admin site by any chance, or administrative citation, or a courtesy notice?
It was a
Did he
courtesy
say?
notice.
Yeah, I don't know why we do that either.
So,
seems pretty weird.
yeah, but just the noticing time period was just brought into my face again. So that's why that's why I set up.
What do we usually do for snow?
I don't know, I'd have to ask Lane on that. Lane, what do we do for snow on a ticket situation, or is that a PD thing? Who gives those?
No, for the obstruction of sidewalk.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would typically be an administrative warning,
administrative warning, typically.
typically.
What does that mean?
Walk us through that process.
So, for instance, snow is actually a perfect example. And we haven't typically done that over 25 years ago when we had a ton of snow. And kids were having to walk out into the street because they couldn't walk on the sidewalk. We had a couple of options, and we would issue an administrative warning, which is a one-time affair. There's no requirement for 10 days. It's simply an administrative citation, which is different than notice of violation. Notice of violation requires the courtesy notice that gives them 10 days, and those are for items that you can
Enforce
enforce
immediately.
in 10 days. And,
sorry, other way around.
and for obstruction of sidewalk for snow, you could do a courtesy notice. Typically now, by the time you issue a courtesy notice, the problem's going to take care of itself.
Right.
Just the
And
sun.
so we typically don't do that. Now, we've just recently had a pretty good snowstorm where there
Yeah.
was a lot of snow built up. I had many council people refer people to me complaining about people not removing the snow from their sidewalk. So we sent out a whole bunch of administrative warnings.
I'm still not sure what an administrative warning
It
means.
simply is, it's like a fix-it ticket. There's no fine associated with it. It's, if you look at the administrative warning or the administrative citation, there's 4 boxes on it. One says warning, the second little box says first level citation, $100. And then the next box is $200 second level. So the officer simply checks the box that's applicable. It's either a warning or it's a first level, a second level, or a third level. The officers could not issue the warning and simply go right to the citation. For instance, when council people complain about noise violations, we have not issued a courtesy notice for a party that's going on at 2 a.m. And we don't issue an administrative warning. We go straight to the administrative citation. Here's your first level $100 and learn a lesson. We could do the same thing with snow obstruction on sidewalks. We've just chosen to give people a chance to do it. There's enough elderly folks out there who haven't got it. People are working, depends on when the snowstorm hits, there's a whole bunch of situations there where, in my judgment, it makes more sense to issue an administrative warning and give people a chance to remove the snow, almost as a reminder.
So I want to understand the process now. There's a complaint that's made, so the code enforcement officer checks out the snow, I would assume, and gives an administrative warning. Is that warning handed to them, taped to the door, or sent through the mail?
It could be any one of the 3, but typically it's just sent.
And do they only go out on complaints?
No, as a matter of fact, what we typically do each year is get the school safe walking routes from Public Works and mail out. We've got a little green reminder card. It just outlines the ordinance and says, hey, FYI, we're in snow season and here's just a friendly reminder to remove the snow when it accumulates on your side.
And so it's mailed to them. And is there a follow-up
On the reminder,
on the snow?
and
So,
then there would typically be a follow-up. And then a code, and then an administrative citation would be issued. We're not issuing fines now due to this pending review you all are having. Typically, yeah, we do an administrative warning, and then a couple of days later, we'd go out and admit and issue the next level, the first level administrative citation, if action hasn't been taken. So an administrative citation is for a short-term incident or event that's, I mean, I can give you the big long list of the different things, the noise obstruction, somebody having a party at 2 a.m. Yeah, we could issue them a courtesy notice, but I think pretty clear that doesn't make a lot of sense to issue a courtesy notice for a party that's occurring at 2 a.m.
We have the right number of code enforcement officers. Is there an industry standard for per acreage or per citizen?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. As far as an industry standard, I don't have any idea. When we started the code enforcement function and kind of revamped and reorganized it back in 2008, we looked around the country for a bunch of different models that we could follow. And frankly, there just weren't really any that were effective. So what we did at that time then was we divided up the city into geographic areas of beats. And I can't remember at the time, what was that, about 2,500 homes, or was it more than that?
Yeah, no, you're right.
About 2,500 homes each. And then we've kind of slightly modified that over the years, depending on, are we short code enforcement officers, or do we feel like the violation rate or number of cases has gone down enough that we can increase or decrease that? So, but that's basically the criteria by which that's been decided. Currently, we have 8 code enforcement officer positions, and one of those is vacant.
9.
Sorry, 9 and 1's vacant. Yeah. If I might add into the discussion though about the noticing, we have no problem whatsoever with the council's wanting more time, 2 weekends in a week or whatever. All of this really boils to code enforcement has always been a function, however you set up the organization, of what the political desire or will of the elected officials in the city want. And back in 07, 08, and this kind of goes to your comment, Scott, we were in a situation where the council wanted a lot more code enforcement. And just maybe as a concrete example of why they would want that, Blaine was showing me this number of violations per category going back. I can't remember what it was, 5 or 6 years, or was it all the way back to the beginning? It was back to like 08, right?
I think I ran the last 5 years and it included.
And then it included 08. And in 08, we had some 3,000 plus inoperable vehicles, just as an example. And in this last year, we only had 318. So obviously there's been a vast reduction in the number of offenses for that particular one. And we have the numbers for the categories too. But it does go to this whole discussion of the need and the appetite for code enforcement severity or lack leniency does vary. So again, to that point, if we're in a position of looking at change to where we would be with that point philosophically, we're more than open to that. That's fine. And we're not suggesting one way or the other. I'm not trying to steer us in either direction either. We're just saying that we do recognize that it does change. And we may be at a point that you either, because we have sort of the luxury of having fewer violations anyway, that more time is okay to concentrate on those cases, or whichever, or we keep it the same. And by the way, also, yeah, if we were having notices that we're only getting 3 days or 5 days or whatever it was, weren't getting the full that was supposed to be being done by the process, then we messed up and we need to fix that for sure. The ordinance as it's written, it's always been my understanding, and I know Lane's too, that we generally try to err on the side of much longer probably than we probably should even give them. There was a special situation going on last fall in this particular neighborhood in which I was trying to get faster enforcement done, but that was still supposed to be done within the parameters of time as ordinance writes it. So not using that as an example, but overall to the program and process, we don't have time, or we don't have problems with giving residents more time to take care of their issues. Compliance has always been a hallmark of the program, as opposed to, we're not just trying to generate revenue, that would be a loser anyway, but or apply fines to people, punish people. We want compliance. We just want them to fix whatever the problem is.
So you brought up the the maybe accelerated timeframe last summer, fall. And so how did that happen from the 10 days to an adjustment?
I don't know. I mean, all I can assume is there was some mess up, or not even mess up, just miscalculation that the mail, we thought they were getting a certain amount of time and they didn't. I don't know. You got any further thought on that?
Yeah, instead of issuing courtesy notices, they issued administrative warnings.
Oh, okay.
And there is an administrative warning followed by an administrative citation.
Because see,
If you read 10-2-204, I think it was covers administrative citations.
yeah, the problem is that I went to a hearing of my neighbor and they were only given 5 days. And I asked the code enforcement officer, why are you only giving 5 days? Why not the 10 days normal? And he dodged it. So I asked again. And he said that he was directed by Lane and Wayne.
Mhm.
So when chapter 10 says 10.
Yeah.
And the council hasn't given further direction to adjust that,
Right.
how can we adjust on the fly based on what you think the direction the wind's blowing?
Okay, so first, just to give some other information on that, and I'll say it again, just like I did a few minutes ago. I'm not sure what that particular officer's statement or interpretation was at the time.
It's recorded. You can go back and.
My direction was, hey, we normally go overboard in terms of time award for fixing these situations. I want you guys to not give extra time in the steps as you proceed along, so that we can get these code enforcement issues in this particular time period hopefully moved along. Now, also, in addition to that, and Lane will be able to confirm this, I also said, just like we always do, as long as people are willing to move forward in their projects, yes, let's work them. If they're in step 2 or whatever, and they say, I need 2 weeks or a month or whatever to install some sprinkler heads or have the junk removal company come and get, that's fine too. Progress is what we're looking for. Non-response, yeah, we would want to moving forward, or uncooperation, no cooperation. Absolutely, we'd be pushing that down the process as well, or at least that was my direction in that particular time frame again. And still, even without that fall push we were making here in this year, if we have cases that are uncooperative, yeah, we will push those forward.
Sure.
And not shorter from a time
That's,
frame.
that's the deal is we can't go shorter than the 10,
No,
but we
cannot.
did. And so that's my concern is one, let's maybe look at that time frame of what that window is they have to correct or at least communicate with the city. And then the second one, though, that is even more important is how do we have confidence that that timeframe is not being squished or changed on the fly, shortened on the fly by you or Lane? So that's something else we can talk about, but maybe another time.
I just, yeah, thank you, Scott. I do want to bring it up a bit here. You brought it up here, you guys, about compliance, also punishment. It's my case. It's not like my neighbor or anybody else, but this is my personally. Yeah, we didn't have much time, to be honest with you. And I think it just, we here, as I said before, I'm gonna say it again, we're here to help people to comply with our city rules and regulation, not gonna punish them. I think that's the bad thing if we try to punish them or try to harass them. A couple of people, they told me that, but like my case, it's a very short, my rental property, only you give me only 5 days. And I have to use my Sunday and Saturday, Sunday, just we have to stay home. I told you before, some guy borrowed a truck from the church and then go over to clean up. No time. I mean, you gotta take a look again. I think we give to people time for them to clean up and do things. Help them to comply with our city rules regulation, not to punish them. Because if you give only 5 days and they cannot finish their job and you can come over and these people, maybe not you, but your people below you harass them. You know what I'm saying? That's it. It's sad to see that. I really don't want to see that, to be honest with you. So more time for them to do clean up or whatever.
Thanks, Tom. I think we're not that far off on the 10 days. I would go probably 14 plus the 3. So maximum 17 for them to respond. That's where I'm at. That's what I have on my
3 days for the mail and 2 weeks.
next 2 weeks.
And we wouldn't have any problem.
I don't have a problem with that. Except for snow removal.
Well, yeah. But snow removal, I mean, it's silly to even send it in the mail
It is.
when it's gone or melted or taken care of in 3 days. And it's probably more like 4 or 5 by the time we get it printed and put it in the mail.
Yeah.
But, so I think snow removal, we ought to just do door hangers.
Except they slip and fall on their way up to the door.
We really have a hesitation at this point. I mean, we still do it, right? We do put notices on doors,
We do.
but we have a hesitation in doing that for a number of reasons, safety. Also, it's not a real thing. Obviously, as you know, we've had an officer killed.
Yeah.
And the other concern is that people don't want us walking on their property, as you have also heard many times. So I guess we still do it in specific instances. Maybe you could give a little. And by the way, I also sort of agree. I mean, if you want 24-hour compliance with snow removal and you're mailing something and it takes however long to get that done, it does seem like it doesn't work very well, but.
Yeah, to me, the appropriate thing maybe would have been if they send out a green card, just send another one of those to the address. Instead of a notice that doesn't really make too much sense. And that would probably be just as much of a reminder to them that, oh yeah, 24 hours, that's the rules. I mean, nobody's caught on that you're not supposed to park on the street on a snowstorm either, but
Right.
they're not getting little postcards either. But if we send out a postcard, maybe instead of a courtesy notice or a administrative warning. Because like you said, both of those are kind of the times come and gone.
And I think a courtesy notice as a postcard would be softer. You know? So I would be okay with that. And then for a violation, if you get an actual violation where there's a fine, I think we ought to include a photo of those violations with that. Instead of having to go through a hearing to see exactly what issues with. Because that's how it was with my neighbor's
Are photos taken every time that there's a notice or citation?
Yes.
That's good.
But they're not mailed with them, which is what you're asking or suggesting, Scott, right?
Yeah, because the gentleman in the lobby that I met, he had no clue what the courtesy notice even was referring to. And honestly, I couldn't help him out much when he showed me a picture because it didn't explain it well enough. So once he showed me a picture of his yard, I'm like, oh, I can tell you right now, okay, that right there needs to be trimmed, that needs to be removed. And so I could point to him. So if they had a photo with this circled and this circled, then when there's a little bit of a language barrier or just things they're not used to, it's much easier for them to understand it and be able to accomplish it. And when he did call, I mean, that was, his person was on vacation. I really think another officer should have been able to look at it and help him. Instead of just, nope, she's on vacation, nobody else will talk to you, goodbye. Was his interpretation of how he got treated, so.
Also,
So I think a photo would help a lot.
sorry.
No, you're fine. So,
I personally think it's sometimes they have grass and weed. They blend it together, but they keep very nice and neat. But some houses, to be honest with you, so many things in their fun house. I just sent the email to every single one of you to check it right there. And this one is Lansing notice one, 2.5 years, close to 3 years, still there,
mm.
right here.
And those are the ones you're saying
3
that
years.
don't comply.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can look at, you see right there, 3 years. And my people, the people in Chesterfield call me multiple times. And I'm sorry, Lang, but I talked to Lang multiple times about this. 2.5 years still there.
Are you
See,
talking
right?
about the yellow house or?
You see that I just sent it to you. And
So, but I mean, is
I've
it
seen-
this
I've seen
or is
like
it
5
this?
you
properties.
see the one have the trailer.
If you
Oh,
have
this
an
trailer.
address, Tom, we could look it up right now through Lane,
Yeah.
give you a history of what's going on.
Yeah, you can send over people over there.
Is it all the trash that's in the yard?
The trailer in front of me, yeah, you see
Lane-
right there? Right
Lane.
there, you see the trailer on the
Right,
right
that-
and trailer, RV on the left and the other one on the right. And then 3 years still there, close to 3 years. And I report many times. But the thing that's to make me upset about is people, they really nice in front of their house and everything to look great and they still have a trouble. But this house, close to 3 years, and many people reports for this one to our city hall and it's still there. To tell me,
So Lane says he's familiar with the case. Would you like to hear what
yeah.
he has to say?
The thing is here, I will, but let me finish first. Lang, I don't know how he did, but he said, yeah, people, they move out from the RV trailer. And then they did follow up and the people, they move back in. Now all the tire, all the trash can, all the cars everywhere in that front of the house. And I have no idea. Yeah, you can tell it, Lang.
Okay, Lane.
Yeah, it's in a backyard, number one. Number two, the officers have been out, responded to that multiple times. The report comes back that I see no evidence of anyone living in that trailer. And my response has always been, look, if somebody's living in a trailer and it's a problem, they're having parties all night long, whatever, then somebody should be calling the police department to respond to that as an issue. But if you're gonna send a code enforcement out there with a simple complaint that somebody's living in a trailer, I think we had this conversation last time about leaving backyards alone. So for me to understand, are we sending code enforcement officers into backyards to open up trailers and find evidence of people living in them based simply on the word of the neighborhood? That's a difficult one for me, how we can get there to doing that, if in fact someone does live in that trailer on a regular basis.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks,
let
Lane.
me respond back to that one.
Well, I was gonna ask you-
Let me respond back to that one.
Gonna ask you a
Okay.
question on
Yeah,
it.
we have time. Let me respond back to that one. These two trailers, RV trailers, they are not in the back of the house. Not on the side, the east side and the west side, parallel to the house, not in the back of the house. So you use the one back in the house or backyard is the wrong. You go there, go over there right now. You can send someone go over there right now. You see the house like this, the RV trailer right here, the RV trailer right here, in front of here, right here, all the tires everywhere. trash can everywhere, and we report multiple times. Nothing happened. It's not in the back of the house.
So it's not just that somebody's living in the trailer, there's trash and other problems. too.
Trash problems when
The front yard is a big mess.
big mess, and also the trailers, people live in the trailer too.
Yeah,
Not- not the back of
Lane's
the
saying there's
house.
no, that his officers aren't seeing evidence of people living in the trailers, but if there are other violations that are there on the property, yeah, they should be taken care of. You know,
Absolutely.
have they been abated? Have they been fined? Do you
I think
know?
I think there's been multiple cases there on the other things.
Mhm.
I don't have that, I can get that information, but as far as somebody living in a trailer and doing something about that trailer, we just don't see any evidence of that. Not saying somebody doesn't live in that trailer. They may, but we don't see it.
Not to change gears too much, and it's good. The one, I don't know where Tom went, but have we ever considered a code enforcement board made up of residents to one, listen to the hearings and provide a layer of oversight?
No, I don't think we've ever considered anything along that line. So we have done other things in the past to try to resolve code enforcement problems in different ways. Like, for example, we've had neighborhoods come and volunteer to take care of their own, and, you know, they've come back and said, well, that doesn't really work. Or there might be a couple of other initiatives along those lines that we've tried from an experiment standpoint, but we haven't done anything like that.
Anybody from the council on
I like the idea that the citizens are, maybe, I don't know how you thought this would work out, they are the ones that are either arbitrating or overseeing the code enforcement, because they're the ones that are either complaining that it's too hard or complaining that it's not hard enough. So I kind of like that.
Are you suggesting this instead of the NLJ that we have now?
or attend the hearings and give input, or maybe just oversight? So, looking for thoughts.
So sometime last year, when people weren't understanding their notices, I had the idea of maybe having a liaison,
Yes.
thank you, a person between the enforcement officers and the residents to explain it to them. For those who couldn't figure it out, so maybe a board like this could help with that as well, or do you just want them to kind of oversee the hearings or?
Act as a liaison and
Uh-huh. If it was a board and three of them, they could have three people to call in case one is on vacation or something. And just have it kind of a volunteer thing, or would you? Kind of like our
adjustment planning.
police review?
Here.
Okay.
I think it-
But if they were answering phone calls, they would have to be on call.
Well, I can maybe do just an
Pretty
email
regularly,
address or
right?
something, yeah.
It's a lot to ask someone to volunteer.
How frequent are hearings?
I think we have a schedule at least twice a month.
I think, Judge Knapp's doing them every week.
Every week, so once a week.
That might be quite a bit.
We might get a retired person that's like, yay, get me out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. Okay.
Every time someone comes to council and complains, we could say, we have a job for you.
And maybe we already have it, I don't know, but it would be nice if we could condense the ordinances in chapter 10 in more layman's terms for public. And that kind of goes along with this board. You know, they have to go to a board to kind of understand the ins and outs of things. Well, maybe we need to have something a little more clear and easier to understand by the regular citizens. So they know what are the standard procedures, what does this mean? They, you know, when they get let's pull up administrative citation, they're like, okay, it's this warning, and then you go down here and the second page, it has, you know, definitions and right to appeal, and you know, they're already emotional. And so by the time they get to the second page, they're all fired up and they're not comprehending anything on the second page. So maybe something a little less legal.
So an explanation of the ordinance, or
I-
because the
I-
ordinance has to stay legal terms?
Yeah, the ordinance is fine, but I
Okay.
think maybe
Like a webpage?
a website, a webpage or a brochure or something that's just more just simpler to understand where they're at and what's happening, what their options are.
When a brochure might be good, just because not everybody has internet and you can just go Google.
Yeah.
But if we could mail out a really simple little guide.
Might be nice. If it had just some simple pictures to show, you know, this is what it's supposed to look like, this is what it's not supposed to look like.
Example.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And it's not dependent on a language.
Yeah. That's true. We do have some non-English speakers in the city that a few, yeah, that would probably have no idea what trying to get out here.
But there's so many ways that people can violate the
Yeah.
code. It'd be
You can't do
Tough.
it all.
to, you'd be giving them a book instead of a pamphlet.
And maybe a little pamphlet, but then it directs you
The
to
most
the,
common,
yeah, and then directs you to the website to more, because even the pamphlet that we have now of the community standards, whatever that's called, is still pretty thick.
Yeah, I think something is simple and very much easy for them to understand.
Well, the website could be in more depth,
Mhm.
and then the book could be
Simple.
simple.
And the website could have like the notices, you know, like the items on the courtesy notice of what they check, and then you click on that and it could show you examples of what's
yeah,
okay and what's not.
yeah, you know, it shows the ordinance numbers, but for most people, that's really not particularly helpful. Those are not easy to look up and then understand. But if each one had a link to to another page that described it in layman's terms with pictures, that would be nice. I don't want to get too overwhelming to put this all together.
Well, and they could even put a little burst on Facebook to let people know about that website. And then they could maybe go there if they need to.
Yeah.
Facebook and social media seems to be the only way to communicate these days.
Put a QR code on the courtesy notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a
Yeah.
brilliant idea.
Yeah, we should have been doing that already.
Yeah. And again, not everybody has a phone, but
Most people do.
it's one way to get ahead of it. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
May I say something? So the picture of Mayor, she sent the last night, the guy has a very nice 1 year with the grass and stuff. And basically he didn't know what his ticket were about. So I think maybe he get the grass messed up with the weeds a little bit, but he kept himself very nice, neat and clean. And I think that those, we give them a credit for that. So not gonna picky to pick that some people, like, oh yeah, this guy have grass and the weed there, and I don't think that's our main goal. Our main goal, just like some houses like this, a big major problem and try to take care of them because cause so much problem in our neighborhood because of the rat and cats and other things, it's just so many things. So maybe just consider about that.
Do we cite for weeds if they're maintained?
If they're maintained.
Yeah.
So this actually goes to a question I wanted to ask later for council's input on. So the way we've traditionally done that is we have just said, yeah, if you cut your weeds to 6 inches or less, I think is the standard.
The courtesy notice.
Right, then you're okay, but the problem is that there's all kinds of gradations of, if you're really not maintaining a lawn, it's called a lawn for a minute, and you've got weeds in one patch, but you've got brown dirt and earth in another patch, then you're not in compliance. And so you've got a problem for interpretation of, what counts as landscaping. One of the big discussions we've had throughout the year is, what do we do for water-wise landscaping? How do we define xeriscaping, all that sort of thing? And xeriscape landscapes can absolutely comply with the code. There's no question about that. But then the problem becomes people don't maintain the xeriscape, or like you brought up a couple, 3 months ago, there's also this gray area about how is it grown in and how do we want to define it, right? So one of the questions, and maybe this isn't the right time in the discussion right now, but one of the questions I have for the council, and maybe even a potential suggestion, is on landscaping enforcement. Even if we don't want to take a different tack for all the other violations, do we want to take a different tack on landscaping enforcement? Maybe we do. I don't know. Maybe it's just a topic to kind of kick around. Because those are the hardest ones to not only enforce, but also to really actually fix. It's not hard to get somebody to remove a car, right? Or get junk out of the yard, but getting somebody to fix a lawn or change the lawn to xeriscaping or define what that is, not only is it more difficult to do from a definition standpoint, but it's also really expensive, obviously. And therefore you get a lot of foot dragging, and you get a lot more non-cooperation, and people saying, well, I shouldn't have to do that. And I'm not installing a sprinkler system, or it's too expensive to maintain, and all those sorts of things. And that particular issue we have wrestled with for years as to how to properly, or best at least, resolve that situation. One of the lessons we learned early on, a few years into this process, was the code enforcement program was great for enforcing sort of a minimum standard, but it can't create responsibility or care or desire, right? And so is there a better way to accomplish that next level? Some of the programs, really frankly, we've tried a lot of different things and haven't had a lot of success with them. But one thing that shows a lot of promise is Operation My Hometown. I mean, they have done a lot of really good things in getting together with their neighbors and taking care of lots of different problems, but landscape problems are a big one that they take care of in these areas. And that can, I would think, across time really help that situation in a way that we just haven't really been very effective with.
Here, Wayne, let me respond back to you. I think this matter is very much a black and white. If the people like the picture of the mayor sent it to us last night, of the green grass. So that I think is nothing wrong there, and he didn't know it was for. But maybe the mix he has right there was the grass and the weed. But I think it's very clear. In other case, like many people, they came here in a public hearing, they spoke about, the water problem. They didn't have green grass or green lawn in front of their house, and that's a different story. But this story I'm trying to point out to you is about the email may have sent it to us, that green, no problem, neat, clean, but mix with the wheat and grass. I think we need to consider how to allow them to have that.
So I'm kind of a landscaping snob. When I see a dandelion, I'm out there with my weed be gone, or and I fertilize 4 times a year. And I try to have the greenest grass in the neighborhood, but there's a few that beat me. But I also recognize that we live in a desert and that we should be able to do xeriscape, or I'm doing a project down in Moab that does desertscape. I'm okay with that too. And natural landscaping. I think as long as it looks maintained, whatever that means, and isn't overgrown, I'm okay with that. But I'm just one voice on the council. But one that really likes green grass, but I'm okay with others that don't.
Yeah.
I don't know, so does that go with what you?
Yeah,
were saying?
I'm a
We're okay with weeds and.
weed and mix with the grass,
Yeah. I think that's what you were saying. I don't know what. the
as
rest
long
of
as
you
they keep
think,
it
but
clean, neat.
I think that's the key.
Yeah,
If
key.
they can keep it maintained and looking decent, not overgrown, then. Especially, we just came out of, we're probably gonna have floods for the next 10 years. We're gonna have so much water, we don't know what to do with. We
There's a
just
lot
came-
of snow up there right now.
We just came out of a really rough summer that we ought to be thinking to allow more of that stuff and I don't know, thoughts?
Yeah,
Just well maintained. I can't keep crabgrass out of my lawn, so, but I cut it.
Well, and I'm anti-killing the bees, so I don't even put pesticides on my dandelions. We go out and one at a time.
Little
So
bit.
everybody's got their own passion about their lawn. I mean, there's different reasons for doing different things. But yeah, I think passing the local scape ordinance that lets people have 30% or less of, or 30% of green. I do think it needs to be changed to fully grown out, not as you plant it, because that's 2 different things. A 4-inch pot's like 6 inches across. That ice plant, when it's fully done, is gonna be 6 feet across. So. But that's, I agree, if it's green or local scaped or whatever they want, and it looks nice, I'm good with that, but we have to have strict what looks nice or it's interpretation, and then we're in the same trouble again.
Right.
yeah,
that's
that's
why-
the big thing.
So nothing over 6 inches.
Yeah. Well, what's a weed and what's a flower?
A weed, I mean, a weed is a flower out of place. Because they're all
Yeah.
flowers, they're
So
all
who
plants,
decides if it's out of place or it's a weed?
Yeah. and that's why it's
And so
hard.
it's,
Yeah,
if we try to say with definitions like looks nice or is maintained, then
Yeah.
we're gonna run into trouble.
yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
But we can always say, if it's overgrowing the sidewalk, that's a problem.
True.
And there are some weeds like thistle that we would never allow.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, because to me, elm trees are weeds, so.
You see the picture, I think we
This
all
one.
see that picture, the guy, he sent it to the mayor. Basically, he keep. In his front yard, looks very nice, nothing over the sidewalk, over other people fence and other neighbor fence, he keep very nice. Very, very neat, look great. And we didn't know what he got, so it mess up with the. Yeah. He's a very responsible person. He looks careful.
One thing we have to always remember with this is that no one likes to be told they're doing things wrong. And so we will, if we have code enforcement, we will have people complain. And that's actually a sign that, that our code enforcement officers are doing something. And so, you know, what one person says, you know, this is what my yard looked like, might be something very different than what the code enforcement officer saw. And so I'm glad that they're seeing pictures, and before we make any judgments, we should have an opportunity to look at the code enforcement officer's pictures. And keep that in mind, that there's always two sides to this. And if we're only getting the resident side, I love our residents, but some of them are going to say things differently than the truth. And because they don't like being told that they're doing something wrong. But there are some issues that we need to fix, and I'm glad we're talking about this. But we have to always remember that.
Well, and I think that's a good point and a good reason to put the picture with the notice. So they truly understand. And if we have to circle with the yellow Sharpie or highlighter, this is the problem.
Well, it also talks about the board that Will mentioned, you know, if it gets to that level, then they can talk to the board, say, and then there's a third party that's looking at, okay, this is what code enforcement says, this is what the citizen says.
Jeff.
How does this really boil down?
And there needs to be good communication, that the resident needs to be able to get their questions answered, to find out. And if the code enforcement officers are too busy to answer questions from the residents, then there's something wrong. We need to get that.
Well, there might be less phone calls if we have pictures.
Right.
Yeah.
It may free up a lot more of their day. Sorry, Tom.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm done.
Okay.
I don't want to lose code enforcement. I think that we need it in our city, and I think it helps our city to be better. But let's make it so that it works. And I think it does work for most. But there's some things we can do to improve.
One thing you mentioned, Lars, is you know, there's always two sides to every story, and 95% of the time we're hearing one side, the resident side. But I am wondering if the approach could be softened. I don't know if there's customer, it's sort of weird to call it customer service, but if there's a training that could be administered to the officers that just would, because like you said, nobody likes to be told you're doing this wrong. If there's a different way that we can approach.
Lane does do training with the officers on a repeated basis, and they review cases. And I think there's always things to be done to make that better. Frankly, a couple of these suggestions here, I think would help a long way to that. I was thinking about the pictures with the CN courtesy notice, for example. First thing I was thinking, well, okay, how would that affect time and budget? I don't think it would be hugely problematic, and could eliminate a lot of complaints and could be seen as a softer approach. I also kind of like the idea of we had links, or at least, hey, go to the website or ask a question about this particular code citation that takes you to a web page and also shows you examples. That could resolve a lot of these questions too. I really don't believe that there's an epidemic of our officers treating people badly out there in terms of residents and complaints, but we do get complaints. Yeah, absolutely. And so there are always better ways to, and we should always be looking for better ways to improve those relations. I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with Will for training. I think sometimes, you know, people, they don't know, They have a tickets already on their hands and, you know, and our employees to come over and to speak something unpolitely to them. So maybe we'll have some kind of training, something. We don't want to let them go, to be honest with you. We want them to stay here and work for our city. But at the same time, we don't want to have, you know, them to harass people in our city to speak some kind like unpolitely.
And they've got a hard job. They're talking, if they make contact and there's phone calls, the citizens are usually not very happy.
Right.
So you've got to have training to know how to deal with
How to
that.
defuse it rather
Yeah.
than escalate.
Yeah, so it's probably the front line of the city in those cases, and I don't want the job for sure, but yeah, if we can get them some training to help them, that would be great. But Lane mentioned that we talked a little bit about rear yard items a few months ago. I'm still in that camp, and I don't know if the council's in agreement that if it's behind a fence, that unless it's an immediate health or safety issue, we shouldn't bother our citizens from their backyards.
What if it smells?
Or, so that's a good question. Or here's another just question for council's preference. So at least as I understand it, and Lane can speak to me if I'm wrong, but we already don't enforce in backyards, especially if they're behind a fence, if it's not visible. But we get complaints from neighbors that are next door neighbors, can see into the backyard, can see an obvious violation. And we do respond to those, right?
If
that
the
correct?
neighbor will allow it to use their property.
So we could not do that as a matter of policy, if that's what the council would like, but then you're kind of running into the same problem that Lars is talking about, just from a different aspect. We'll still have an unhappy neighbor.
Or, sorry. Or to, I had a complaint last summer when it was really dry. They were concerned the waist high weeds were gonna.
Oh, that catch fire or something, right? Yeah. Yeah, we do get those.
So that would be a safety issue.
Right.
Right?
But I believe telling them what furniture they put on their back porch is none of our business. I don't care if it's indoor or outdoor. If that's what they want back there, go for it.
Yeah.
That's one to me that is kind of irritating, that why do I get to tell you?
Or a disabled vehicle in your backyard. I don't care.
Yeah.
Or if you have
That's what, so what are the
overgrown.
violations that would not fit into health and safety? That would be one that a neighbor says, that's a violation of the code. And call it in.
We had the
Wouldn't
horse
be
in the
health and
backyard.
safety. Yeah,
On the Crown apartment area.
yeah. So a car one might be one inoperable vehicle in the back, but we've
Okay.
also had where you've got 6 inoperable vehicles in the back. And then you have tall weeds growing between them, and then you have rats and stuff like that. And so there's this sort of gray area again, in that is one inoperable vehicle in the back, a health and safety issue? Probably not. I would agree with Scott, but if there's 6 and then there's other combined stuff with it, it becomes a health and safety violation, then you're back in that same boat again. But, and I don't know, maybe I should ask Lane, I'm assuming that our guys differentiate between those kinds of calls. Like, I'm almost afraid of the answer here, but would we ever give somebody a ticket because a neighbor complained that was next door and was looking into the backyard and they had some kind of furniture that wouldn't qualify as outdoor furniture on a porch? Would we do something like that?
Not typically.
But we have.
Well, if people mention the word rats, if people are,
Oh,
we've trained
okay.
people that
Right.
rats is the magic word. All you gotta do is say, there's a rat back there, and now it's the health and safety. And you want us, when somebody mentions rats, do we take an interest in enforcing that? It is an ordinance that you can't use inside furniture outside. So
Yeah.
we would prefer, I guess the best way to answer that is our stance is that we would prefer to give people their backyards.
Yeah,
And
okay.
leave that is our preference. Now, when someone has a complaint and we go check it out and they let us look, over their backyard and say, "I gotta look out my window and see this all day long. What do you think about that?" Then, yeah, that's a judgment call. I don't know how you're gonna write an ordinance to imbue that type of judgment on 9 code enforcement officers. I don't think we can imbue councilmen on what would be one side of that line or another. So
Yeah.
that's our general stance. If we need a different stance, we're happy to, where there needs to be an absolute no-go. If it's, somebody's got a couch on the back, we don't care if there's rats there. We're not messing with it. It's their couch, they want to put on
Well,
the back, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I don't think a couch determines a rat or not, but
Yeah,
I think that's the thing
Yeah.
is, if we have evidence, not just evidence of rats, if
Right.
we see rats,
right.
okay,
that's health and safety.
that's a health and safety.
Yeah.
But if the neighbor says, there's rats over there.
Right.
No,
Well,
Maybe,
and,
maybe not.
I have
We
rats
don't-
too,
we don't-
probably.
yeah.
They're probably just roaming the neighborhood. So,
well, the other thing is there's neighbor disputes
Yeah.
and one can
Yeah.
Right.
hand grenade the other.
use it.
Yeah, and use this. Oh, I know now. The code enforcement guy told me just say rats and they'll come and empty their backyard. And then it's just, we're fighting a fight. But my thing is, okay, so say a backyard has 6 cars that don't run,
Mhm.
but it's gravelled, there's
Yeah.
not a weed, nothing.
Yeah.
And they have a travel trailer and a boat and quads
Right.
and 6 cars.
Yeah, if you told us, I mean, because it's on the books, it's an ordinance right now, yeah, I guess we would normally enforce that if a neighbor was adamant enough about that, but if you guys told us, we just plain don't want to do anything in backyards except
Health and safety.
very specific health and safety issues, yeah, we do.
Because my thing is, a lot of these PUDs and that have a storage area. So there's all that on gravel right next to all the houses. So what's the difference between allowing that and allowing a guy to have some stuff in his backyard? If it's gravel and not 6-foot weeds. Because weeds are a huge danger.
Yeah,
I agree with
weeds would
that.
be a safety issue.
So I'm just looking at kind of what we allow and what we don't allow. And
So we done that one. About the furniture, I'll bring it back to about the furniture. The front porch, the old gentleman is over 80 years old. Have 3 or 4 chairs, the front porch there, and not a sofa, just chairs. And what the code enforcement officer came by and said, well, you cannot have that chair on the front porch. You have to throw it away, or I'm gonna give you a ticket. So, but the old gentleman is he over 82 years old. So what kind of rule here we have in the front porch? Not a sofa, it's not love seat or whatever. It's just regular chair, comfortable chair. So what kind of rules we have here for front porch?
You can have furniture on your front porch, but it's got to be outdoor designed furniture,
Yeah.
like patio
Patio,
furniture.
that right.
So if you had like a stuffed easy chair,
Okay,
that would not be allowable.
yeah, but he doesn't have that. He doesn't have a love seat, or he doesn't have a sofa or a lazy chair, but just the chair just like basically something like that one. Is that feasible?
So that's what
No,
they would
because of the
call an indoor.
upholstery.
That
Yeah.
indoor, okay.
Yeah, that's indoor
Yeah.
furniture.
He just wanted me to ask you guys that question.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
but if you had the same style as that furniture that was like resin plastic and like an Adirondack, I'm just using that as an example, then that would be permissible.
One more thing, multiple notices arriving just days apart, so. Maybe one's a courtesy notice and one's an actual violation, but I think. Maybe I missed it in there, but it'd be nice if we didn't have multiple notices within 30 days. If our guys miss it on the first go around, that's on us. We don't get to go around tomorrow and find more things on that same house and send another notice. because they're already hyper upset on the first one. And then they get another one 2 days later, and they're just about ready to go ballistic or move out of the city, which we don't want that either. So, so I don't know if that's in there, but I think we ought to have that as part of the policy.
That's a pretty easy one.
I know this was part of one of the complaints back in the days, maybe a second number or like a hotline number. Because we had a code enforcement officer that wasn't working for us anymore. And so that number just went to voicemail and nobody was returning. And so if there was another number that was a hotline number to the supervisor, to the lane, whoever, just so they can communicate. There needs to be communication, otherwise it just boils over because they're stewing over it, not hearing anything. Yeah.
So when you were saying the multiple notices,
Yeah.
the item in the ordinance that I do not like is if you find one thing, then you can just pile on 26 and keep kind of piling them on and treating them differently if they have a second and a third. I think each one should be a first, period. I mean, we don't hold grudges. We don't come back and punish more and more. If we find another one, you go back and treat it as a first instead of accelerating it because they've had a first. The second one's accelerated faster, the third one's accelerated, and it goes on and on.
So we would be fine with that if you, the council, don't want us to do that. But the reason behind doing that is that you do have chronic offenders out there that reoffend and reoffend. You can barely keep them in compliance, and then they're out of compliance again as soon as they possibly can be. So you just end up in this eternal cycle of cases. But
And when you just do someday I'm gonna know the terms of these, but administrative citation, if they're repeat offenders, you just do a citation.
Yeah, okay, so good thought. And there are reasons why you would do that and why you wouldn't, in terms of, is the offense gonna lead to potentially a larger action later, like an abatement, or is it not? And Lane would be better at explaining what the differences are there and when they are used, but that's usually the criteria. That's why you choose one over the other.
And as I say that, I'm thinking, well, that's probably not even going to accomplish the goal
Right.
of
Or might not. Sometimes it does.
of the city of having them comply.
Right.
They're just going to, flip the
Fine.
bird back at the city and say,
Right, in an administrative citation standpoint, what you're hoping they'll do is take care of the problem quickly on the warning stage, right? But if you go down that path, fines start loading up, and that's not what we want, right? I mean, we're trying to get compliance.
I think we sitting here, we try to do something, try to have the majority of people in our city. And with the people, with a small number of people, they try to do something to find the loopholes or something in our city, and that we can treat them differently. But basically, we try to focus on the majority of people here in our city, like the thing is we need to do. Yeah.
I agree, 90% of them are gonna be law-abiding citizens that want to do what's right. They just have issues with one or two things, and we need to treat them kindly. And then you get
Respectfully.
you get the 5 or 10% that are gonna be repeat offenders or not
And
be-
that's about right. I mean, you're about right on the percentage there of how it goes.
pulled it off back in my head, but so one other thing on chapter 10, and then I think I'm probably done for tonight. Is 10.1.304, and maybe this is normal, I don't know, but it says the code enforcement officer or designated enforcement official is authorized to arrest. I hope we don't ever arrest anybody.
No, we've never done that, but there may be some legal definition to why that's written the way it is. Do you know, Lane?
Yeah, it was written because originally back in, I don't know, 25 years ago, our code enforcement officers were frequently post-certified. And so they had the ability to.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons
Yeah.
why I have this on the administrative side is we specifically, across time and to past bad examples in other cities, didn't want it under a police power because there had been problems like that had arisen in other jurisdictions.
So we can take that out.
Yeah, I
Probably
would hope
time.
so, yeah.
Yeah, they don't have the rest of the powers.
We only had one officer that was post-certified, didn't we?
We've had ones that became post-certified later with full police powers, became police officers, but I can't think of who would be. Do we have any that are post-certified right now?
Currently, we do, with,
Who is it?
two
Doesn't matter,
officer,
I guess, but-
Well, and our officer that got killed was post-certified.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Did she get
Which it was,
benefits?
Yeah.
She
Yeah,
got
she
police
was.
benefits for that.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah, we could remove that if that's council's desire without any. Probably would be kind of a cleanup thing anyway. But no, we're not out arresting anybody.
Just read that. Struck me.
I don't know, if maybe you guys can help me out, Wayne and Lane too. There's sometimes officers, they use the word like bulldozer very often, like kind of scary people. They try compliant, they try to do it right, their part and. In fact, they have multiple people from my hometown came over and try to help him out. But so if you didn't do this, I can bring bulldozer over him and tear everything down. So that kind of like the language. I think to go back to the training again. Maybe that we don't use that kind of often until when they very much they against a policy or against a rules or regulation we have here in our city, and we can use that. But people they are trying to comply and we just threaten them, and I think that's not very nice to do that. To be honest with you. Make people angry. Yeah.
So I agree with you completely, Tom. You should not be doing that. I would also just maybe for general context, kind of point out that if you think about all the number of cases that we do in a year. I would be hugely surprised if the number of complaints making those sorts of accusations even rose above that 5 to 10% level that are the repeat offenders that. And I'm not even really trying to connect the two. All I'm saying is there's a small percentage of these cases and people and offenders that end up in these sorts of discussions with code enforcement officers, which we will and do and want to train those officers to do better and better as they're having those conversations. But there are people out there, it's like Will said a minute ago, you're 95% of the time hearing the one side of the story without substantiation of what's happening on the other side. So all I'm asking there is just to keep that in mind. Do we want to help and make that better in the way that you're suggesting, Tom? Yes, absolutely.
Accurate statistic as well, the 95.
Could you say
I
that?
pulled it out and then.
so my other thing that I just remembered when somebody said something was abatements. And I really think abatements should come to the council or a board. Like you suggested, the board, I'd never thought of that for approval. Just one more step away for the transparency part of it and just so people understand what's going on. I don't know if we abate front yards very often or if it's mainly backyards. And if we change the backyard thing, there's not going to be hardly any abatements, but I don't know. That's another one.
So you might remember Lane had mentioned the stat before. We do about 100 and some odd abatements a year, of which 20, 25-ish, whatever. The other number, 85, is the ones that would involve yard and material and that sort of cleanup. So the other ones are emergency abatements where, for example, you'd have an empty house and we're going in and boarding it up because people are occupying it for various nefarious purposes. So obviously I wouldn't want that abatement having to be delayed any longer than it possibly would be. The other 85, I also would definitely not recommend that comes to the council because you're going to have a whole lot of time spending with whatever it is you were going to want to do with that. The board concept, I've never really thought about that before. Maybe we could put some thought into doing something like that. I mean, that really is the ALJ's function. And the reason we have the ALJ the system set up the way it is. Maybe there's a way to modify who the ALJ is. And for a long time, we had an outside contractor that was the ALJ that wasn't even a city employee. We could go back to that. The reason we kind of went away from that is because we couldn't get anybody to do it. at the wage we're paying on a regular and ongoing basis. And we try to separate that duty from an employee standpoint as much as we could. But if that's not far enough, maybe we go a farther distance there again and go back to that other route. Or maybe we do try the board thing. I think that would be really
Yeah.
hard to get enough people together to do that on a regular basis, to make those abatements not even stretched out further into months than they already are, but I don't know what the council's,
I could probably come up with 2 in my neighborhood that would join the board.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Might be a couple back here.
That's true.
so, okay, that was just another thought I had over the year.
I don't think we should. The council should approve abatements. I think that we should have staff do that. And it's not something we should be.
I'd be more comfortable with the board or an outside person than staff. It just looks too tight to the resident.
it's always been a difficulty, you're right.
It's just from what they say.
And that's one way we could soften
Mhm.
abatements, is to separate it from the city if it was a board or an outside party. So. Yeah. Whereas it may, yeah.
Yeah, I like the board or an outside attorney,
But who gonna pick those?
forget ever I said council.
The council gonna pick those, or
I don't need more phone calls.
No,
uh,
we could, well, and we have the volunteer page on our website and that. And so we could just put that on there and let people volunteer and then take applications, kind of like we do all the other boards.
okay.
So, just a
Um,
thought.
so-
So did you have anything else, Scott? Your list of
I
lists?
have one more.
Okay,
Okay. Go back to the training. This is in the past. and
Okay.
He's not here anymore. Prison Walker, very close of mine. He brought up and, he says, the neighbor, something up or something, and he called code enforcement out. And then they came over to the neighbor house and they said, well, you know what? Your neighbor told me to do that.
I know, that is a big complaint.
And that's a big major thing in our city. It then is to create a chaotic in the community, to create a neighborhood, a friendship between he and other guy next door is gone. And now he gone too, he's not here anymore. He's moved somewhere. I think we should not do something like that and create a big problem. People fight each other. And I think that we need to have a good training for that. And if our employees to do something like that, I think we need to let them go immediately, to be honest with you, immediately. Because they create a chaotic in the community. And Christian Parker is real upset about it, and he told me that. But I want to bring it up.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot about that one. So what is our stance on telling them who turns them in?
We don't do that, and it's been a very long time since I've found any substantiated case of that, doing that. Can you think of any in the last while? And what would while be in your mind?
Years.
So we're still getting the complaints,
Yeah, we get occasional complaints, but
but they're still
I
telling the neighbor.
would refer that back to that, very small percentage of, it could be misunderstanding, it could be. All I'm saying is when we get the complaints, they're not supposed to be doing that. We investigate that.
Okay. Oh, you do investigate? So next time I get a complaint, I'll just
Sure.
turn it over to you instead of
Absolutely.
saying,
Yep.
sorry, we'll train them better?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, in
Okay.
fact, I would say absolutely do that.
Okay,
You're already trained to do that. They're not supposed to do that.
Maybe they're scared to tell you when, and man, be honest with you, but a few people out there, I know, but not the one particular one. I would want to bring it up, but very close to me.
Nicole, can you summarize all this for us?
I have notes.
She's like, yes, yes, yes.
I was,
Not right now, but
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I can put together kind of a list of what was discussed and go from there.
I kind of doubled up.
Yes.
Hopefully, I knew she would be doing it, but I kind of did too what the high points were. I'm not sure I or heard if we got any really conclusion on the landscaping question. Do we want to do something differently than we're already doing, or do we want to?
I think one of the things was changing it from 30% to 30% at least of full growth. That's what you suggested.
That's, yeah, because otherwise, if you do it 30% of when they plant it,
Uh-huh,
yeah,
it's not,
it's just gonna be a sea of,
right?
it's just gonna be all green anyway. So yeah, it should be a full growth. Which can be Googled by anybody anytime. And there's called a app called Plant Finder. Go and it tells you everything about it. So they don't need to be a horticulturist or anything else to be able to decide that. So it's pretty easy.
I'm just thinking that if there's the question between, this is a new plant and how big will it be 30%? Those aren't the houses that we should be enforcing.
Yeah, and largely they probably aren't. I mean,
Right.
the ones I'm thinking about are the ones that one side of the street, you've got the same house that's on the other side of the street. They look exactly the same. Except this guy is the manicured lawn guy like Scott, and this guy doesn't do anything. He cuts his weeds, but it's basically not, I mean, it's green and growing weeds. Do we not do anything with that?
You can keep it
I think,
clean and
I
neat.
think it's maintained and
Under 6
Maintain at the
inches?
standard of, cut the 6 inches and
Yes.
And not growing over into the.
encroaching
Yeah,
on the
not going over the
sidewalk.
sidewalk or draping over the.
Yeah.
I think the major thing here is when I think that a lot of houses that they have some multiple cars up on the grass, and I think it's you need to focus on that one. too.
Yeah, and,
Oh, yeah.
and that's easier and we do that.
Yeah.
That's not,
That one's really easy to see. But the landscape, it is a judgment call. But that's what I think too. If they're doing the local scape, you just keep driving.
As long as it's maintained,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and still maintained is hard to define,
okay, yeah,
but
6
I'd
inch.
say give them the benefit of the doubt more often than not, rather than getting into it.
okay, let me ask you,
encroaching on the sidewalk, that's sign one that is being maintained, right?
It's not being
If,
maintained.
if it's
It's not.
Oh.
or that it is, I mean, okay, if it's not encroaching on the sidewalk, then it's being maintained most likely. If
Oh,
there's a
not-
question,
okay.
Right? If it's going over the sidewalk, then that's a sign that it's not being maintained. I mean, that's one sign that you could use, and there's probably others that you could use to be like, okay, those are triggers that says this is not being maintained.
And over the 6 inches, whichever
Over
it
the
is.
6 inches is another one.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a judgment call.
yeah.
What's,
At least they keep the, grass very green. Very green.
okay, let me ask you, let me
Grass
ask you
being
one more
ultimately
down,
brings the
down the
problem.
progression.
Yeah,
So you've got a guy who lives on a street and there's no grass and there's no weeds and there's nothing but dirt. And they're not growing anything and they dig it or they pretend they're gonna do something and then they grow weeds for a while and we come back after them again. From an abatement standpoint, there's just really not a lot we can do. So the only other solution is to just find the crap out of them, frankly, over and over again, till it's just more expensive to pay the fines than it is to put in lawn or landscaping. Do you want us to not do that, or do you want us to do that?
oh boy.
Personally, if it's just dirt, I'm good with that. If there's no weeds, no nothing, it's like having concrete. It's just plain. Now, if there's weeds, because
if it's not encroaching on the sidewalk, and if it's less than 6 inches, those are the
Then
two
it's dirt.
criterias,
Yeah.
then
Right,
it's, and you're
maintained
talking
dirt.
maybe like 5 houses in the city that are like that, and there's not that many.
yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
and legit, I mean, for me, if you don't have flowers out front, I don't like your yard. You could have green perennials and I'm like, yeah, still no. You mow your lawn, but you don't have anything colorful. So everybody's their own level. So that's why for me to say dirt, yeah, sure. It's clean, it's flat, it looks nice. That is not my standard, but I wouldn't have a problem with just that if that's all it is.
Yeah,
If there's no cars parked on it, no furniture, no indoor furniture on it.
The way the state's talking about water use, we may all be desert scape in a couple
I
of
know.
years, so.
Yeah, and that's what we might be having more heartburn than, but that's just one opinion. You guys all have your own.
I'm a really and focus on the sub houses that have a big major garbage stuff like the picture I showed you in front of the house.
Yeah,
That's a huge, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that reminds me that I was thinking about this. If we change our landscaping to allow dirtscape or whatever you want to call it, just as long as maintained 6 inches, doesn't encroach on sidewalk. That gives our code enforcement officers way more opportunity to look for the other stuff.
Oh, for sure. That's why I asked the landscape question in the first place. I mean, it's way easier to enforce all the rest of the ordinances. The landscaping one is the tough one.
I think if everything's under 6 inches, that's gonna be less of a blight for the neighborhood than cars or junk or outdoor furniture or graffiti.
The only thing I would push back on that is that we really pretty much have taken care of all those other issues. So the landscape decision, and again, it's just a tough decision. So I'm not trying to influence you one way or the other, but that's where our issue really is. It's the landscaping. So at some point, if there's more than 5 in the city that are just nothing but dirt, maybe you guys will want to relook at that at that time. I don't know, but it's it could get pretty crazy, and it'll take a while. It's not going to be like overnight, but desertscape, I'm very familiar with what desertscape is and looks like, and it can be horrible, or it can be manicured.
Mhm.
I don't think the critical point, we try to bring it up about the grass, about particular things like you just mentioned. I think we just focus on houses, they really have a big mess in front of their house. And that over time, we let it go or we pass this and we didn't do anything. I think that's we try to do something particular like that house, like so many tires in front of the house, so many garbage can in front of the house. RV trailer in the right side and the left side right in front of the house. That we need to take care of. Just stuff like, grass under, like we mentioned about dirt or grass or weed. I think that's it's not a critical point here, to be honest with you.
Okay,
well, and honestly, some of those might be the ones that'll never clean it up. And the only thing we can do is abate it or whatever. But I mean, I know there's some that are just gonna thumb their nose at us the whole time. But for the majority, they do
Yeah.
take care of it. There's probably 5 that are like that in the city that just thumb their nose and say, you're not ever gonna tell me what to do. So I'm pretty sure they're still working on it.
Amen.
Yeah,
Like people at Walmart, yards of this out.
no, you don't. Oh, on a, yeah, let's not social media. Anyway,
Yeah.
Okay. Can we review your notes in like 2 weeks when Dawn and Jake are back?
yep, okay.
Kind of just make sure everybody's cool with where we're going.
Hey, anybody else? Okay, one last motion. Or a motion,
Motion to adjourn.
and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Yep.
Talking about